Alrighty, and so let's talk about the setup position and then how that can influence a player's ability to pivot in a functional manner to the top of the swing, right? So we see a lot of players, they will get themselves into a spot in the address where they'll have a lot of right side bend, right? And they crunch this right side in, get this right shoulder really close to the right hip. And then we see a slew of follow-on effects from that. That might be like a flat shoulder turn, a lifting of the arms, a lack of rotation. So what I want you to do is quickly kind of give me a bit of an idea around, we were talking before off camera about an exercise that you talk about in regards to a feeling and a reference between the top of your hips and your rib cage, right? Of how to ensure that players aren't getting themselves into that spot.
Yeah, so the pattern that you're sharing there is one that I just see really regularly. So especially when I 3D players, and it shows the animation of the rib cage and the pelvis, and you actually see then how much compression there is on the trail side there, which makes it just really challenging for a player to just to rotate and move well to the top of backswing. So essentially, what is displayed as almost a crunch on this right side and a compression there is in many ways it's an adaptation due to the rib cage orientation and address. So if you essentially simply just standing well, pelvis position, rib cage position, making it easy possible for the golfer themselves, let's just look at how can we keep the distance between the top of the hips and the distance between the bottom of the rib the same as you move down into setup position. And that on its own can be a little bit of a challenge for some players, simply because of arm hang, and because when you go, obviously you set up in the address position, your right hand is going to be lower than your left. So again, I like simple things in golf.
Yeah.
So you can almost, while trying to maintain that distance between the hip and the rib, you go into your old school arm position here, then you're going down into your setup there, keeping it nice, just nice and easy for the player.
Yeah.
Essentially, the adaptations that you see through the setup position, throughout backswing, players are going to move differently from, it could look like a similar start position or a similar error they're making in the start position, but players will always move differently because we just have different body types.
Yeah.
And everyone's anatomy is different. We have different strengths and weaknesses. But again, if I go back to the 3D that I see, when I look at 3D data, then in a lot of cases, you can really go back to the way the player's setting up is influencing hugely the way they move in the swing.
With the massive, we see this domino effect, right? It's like how players set up, then influences the takeaway, then influences the backswing, transition all the way down to impact. So many players get caught up on trying to shallow the golf club, get into a stronger impact position by dragging the handle forward. But just pertaining to what we're talking about today, if you actually just get yourself into a more functional setup position, specifically talking about the distance at the top of the hip, the bottom of the rib cage being a little bit more, let's say, centered and stuck on top, or stacked on top, I should say, in this orientation here, well, just from that position, that enables our body to rotate in such more of a functional manner, rather than if I'm tilted down like this, well, straight away, if I try and do that same, I physically can't, right? I'm out of whack straight off. And we see that compression down there, right? Now, from that, we're going to look at like the importance of ensuring that players do this in such a way that it's not robotic and mechanical, right? Because let's say you're on the range and a player sets up, they've got too much of this right side bend like that, and they go, okay, well, Ian and Kerrod, they've gone, let's chuck ourselves over here and go down. Well, now all of a sudden they've gotten so comfortable to having the club face looking a certain way in their eye line and so on and so forth. There's no way in any form they're able to take that to the golf course and produce that in a performance manner. So what you said about routine is so important. And whenever I'm instructing players to walk into the golf ball, it always starts behind with the golf club already in their hands, right? Whereas we see too many players, they set up to the ball, they might put their left arm like this and they're setting up, and then they bring that puppy underneath like that. And they go, well, why does my setup look funky? Well, that's simply a result of your routine. So I think in combination and echoing what you said, it's so important for players whenever they're approaching the ball to ensure that the golf club is in their hands. So when they actually get down to the ball, they're able to, from this feeling, I feel like my body's a lot more square on, and then set the feet, where you can see straight away I'm more likely to get into this position where my upper and lower hub, or the center of my sternum and the center of my pelvis, are more on top, correct?
Absolutely.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to put this golf club down on the ground here. And I'm going to put my hands across my shoulders like this. Now, why is it important that we don't put the golf club across our shoulders in this position and we actually use our hands rather than instead?
Okay, so essentially when we set up well in the golf swing, just have good posture, it allows the body, the spine to move segmentally. So I like to think of rotation like a snake.
Hmm.
So you can think of like almost like one vertebrae at a time moving.
Yeah,
So
sure.
if we move really well, if we move well through that, that's how we would look to achieve rotation.
Okay.
And I don't want to go too much into it, but essentially when we move well through the spine, we don't get too much sway, lift, and thrust, all that extra movement
Yeah, sure.
that you see a lot of players have. And then you look at the best players in the world and you're like, oh, how do they move so simply?
Yeah.
And it's because they just rotate really well.
Yeah.
And they figured out how their body moves for them and how the best way for them to achieve rotation to the top of backswing. So if you set up with your hands across your shoulders there, and I'm actually going to get you to put your your right hand on your stomach. And now if from that setup position there, all I would want you to do, I'm just going to put my hand by your head here. I'm just going to slowly guide your right shoulder around your spine. Awesome.
Yeah,
So
beautiful.
perfect there. So almost in that sensation there, it should be a little bit different sensation than say the typical way that you'd see like some players, like they'll put the club across their shoulders to turn their shoulders, which I think for a lot of players can be really good as well because it's the simplicity of it. But there's definitely times when it's like, okay, how can we look at going a little bit more into this, be a little bit more precise. So again, if you just setting up here, the simplicity of right hand on your stomach, left hand on your shoulder, just guiding the trail shoulder around the spine, feeling almost one rib at a time moving as you're going around, because it's not just the spine, that each layer of ribs will move independently. So that's what we're looking for in the rotation to the top backswing.
Mate, and I can feel just this sort of sequence where it's really coiling me up in a very powerful manner. And the thing I really like about this is I know that it is going to remove the element, which is apparent for a lot of players, of where they simply just pull the hands and arms off the golf ball. And because our shoulders can move independent from each other, like I can try and get my left shoulder facing behind the golf ball, but my right shoulder hasn't done anything. When we're doing a drill such as this, it removes that element. So it brings a greater awareness for players of when they get this right hand on their stomach, and then they just get the feeling of that back shoulder moving behind them, of really opening up that chest and feeling the difference of how that upper and the lower part of the spine would work to get themselves into a position where they are in a functional spot. Now, what I just want to do is then just go back from the setup, right? If I'm got too much tilt like this, and I am that player who has too much side bend and they're really struggling with that backswing, and then I go like that and then that, if I'm trying to get my right shoulder behind me, I can't. So
that's right, yes.
It's almost like a layering of the drill. Number one, we stand up dead straight, put your hand on your tummy like this, left hand on your shoulder, get down into your position, and then just get that sensation of the back of the right shoulder. I would like to think about this part here, pointing back towards the target. That really opens up that chest there.
What I'll often do with players actually, Kerrod, if you go back to your start position there, is I'll actually stand here and hold the club a couple of inches above the shoulder and just have them perform this drill without touching the club there.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. So that's one that I'll do regularly as well. And again, just another good benefit from it as well. If someone's not in a good start position, so typically the one that we're referencing today, the compression on the trail side, often you'll see the left hip will sit somewhat backwards as well. So yeah, so that's exactly. So and when someone's not set up well, then they're going to look to achieve the rotation in the backswing and just any options that the body now has left. You've taken away the options that it would have had. So very common adaptation from here is to see more lower body movement, the pelvis shifting. Whereas if you set up well and you go through that drill, it actually helps you with your sequencing as well. So if you set up well, you're actually working more of a top-down pivot instead of making an early adjustment with hand usually through wrists, through lower body, through the pelvis. If you set up well and go with that drill, it's helping you, one, just move well, and then it's helping the sequencing as well, which will help you in your transition.
And I love this, and just tying a bow on this for the players at home, this is a great exercise that they can practice at home, right? It's something during the winter months if they can't get down to the golf course, just to build awareness of this movement pattern. And I think if they layer the following exercises on top using what you've just said there, is number one, just get an understanding, even just placing their fingers at the top of their hips and the bottom of the rib cage, feel like it's an equal amount. Generally, we're going to see as a reference the upper and lower body on top here, then tilt down from the hips, okay? Then from there, all I'm going to do is put my right hand on my tummy, left on the shoulder, get the feeling of what it's like getting the back of that trail right shoulder moving behind myself. Well, that would be such a different feeling than here. Then all of a sudden, if I put that golf club in, I've got that awareness, I've got that feel down into my posture. I'm feeling a lot more stacked on top here, back of the right shoulder behind. How does that look, Ian?
Looks brilliant. Yeah, very good.
Feels great in a much more, let's say, functional and strong position to be able to deliver that golf club. I'm going to map that feeling out once more and hit one down there. Back of the right shoulder. I can definitely feel that sort of spiraling feeling of all the upper body moving and rotating around itself. Off we go. All right, my man. That felt great off the face. I love it. Cheers.
Good.